Guys, gals, and pals, welcome back to Paint and Talk episode 28. I did indeed get some paint on my shirt before I started recording. I don't know if you can see it. If you can, we're going to ignore that because it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. We're going to keep it walking. As always, I hope you've been good since the last time I've seen you. And for today's topic, I want to discuss morality. I want to talk about morality, as maybe you could tell from the title. I think morality is such an interesting thing to discuss because, it's a conversation we all get to abstain from. You know what I mean? We basically, from more or less, I would argue, kind of from birth, get our morality told to us. Society has morals, some of which are very obvious, some of which we discover as we get older, and, we're programmed to think a certain way about certain things. And in some cases, this is very good. I mean, the idea of you shouldn't run around doing murder is definitely something instilled in us, and that's a good thing. That's obviously a good thing that we don't, because the natural human instinct would be to be way more primal than we are. So it's a good thing that we get some of this instilled in us, but it's also a really bad thing in some circumstances too, because since morality is subjective, it changes. If we were all without exception, if all of us were living in the year 1400, we would have all been called witches by now and hung. For the men, I guess you would have been just called the devil or something. But the point is, morality changes, and that's a good thing too. But sometimes that implicitly will mean that there are bad morals. There are things that we believe right now that will be changed over the next 100 years, and we'll look back at this time and go, why would we ever think that way about certain things? I'm sure we can all think of a few examples of things that you think aren't as bad as people say, or maybe a lot better than people say, and sometimes you feel like a crazy person because you can't say that. I think all of us have those things, But it's all so hard because when you get to the core, you got to ask the questions of what is good? What is bad? What do these things look like? There are a lot of ways of going about this. There's a lot of ethical and moral theories. I will be honest, I'm not too familiar with any of them. I'm familiar with some of Nietzsche's stuff. I'm a little bit of Kant stuff, or Kant, is it Kant? Those philosophers, I know what they say, but for the most part, I've kind of stayed away from that stuff because I think morality is a very personal thing. I think that we all have our own morality. And that's why I always say, as long as you're not doing direct harm to other people, then I'll let anyone think that what they want to think, But it's weird because, I have things that I do that I consider right and wrong, right? But, I don't know why, some things I just don't like. And I feel a lot of morality that, at least I can say this for myself, I don't know about you guys watching this, a lot of, my morals and the way that I move, they are based on feeling, right? Which is in part a good thing because I'm doing things that don't feel bad. I feel I'm doing things that are good things based off my gut instincts, and that's gotten me pretty far. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, but I haven't destroyed lives or done anything like that. You know what I mean? I'm overall not the worst guy. So it's gotten me far enough where I'm not directly hurting people's lives all the time. But also shouldn't I know what my guiding principle is? Some people are ragingly individual with their morality. They're I'm just gonna do whatever benefits me and basically just screw everyone else. And that's not, in my opinion, I don't think that's a good thing, right? But in their opinion, they're doing the right thing all the time. You know what I mean? I think my thoughts about this were really sparked when I was, I want to say I was 14. I was driving on a road trip with my brother. He just got his license or something like that. And a police officer, a cop, they entrapped him, right? Which is basically when you do this thing to, the police officers will do this thing where they kind of make it so you have to pull over in a no pullover zone. That way they can give you a ticket and makes the county money. It's a thing that happens in America a lot. And it's bad just because, people are paying money they can't afford a lot of the time. So my brother this happened to him. And I remember we were sitting there and he was like, this is the worst thing ever. He was basically talking about this cop, they were a terrible person. And I agree, I don't think what happened's right. But for the first time at my like, I think like 14 is kind of the time when you're starting to come into life as like, oh, I'm a real person with real thoughts. And for the first time, it really got me to think like, oh, but this cop thinks he's a very good person. Like, he's going to go back to the station or wherever. I don't know how police officers operate outside of like big cities, but like, he's going to go back to wherever he goes, and he did a good thing because he just made money for the county. And like, this is a good act for him, where it's a bad act for my brother. And that's when I really realized like, the good guy in one person's story is the bad guy in another's. And I think that's like a really basic thing to think. Like, I think most people, like, I'm sure a lot of you heard that and you were like, big whoop, you discovered like the most basic fact of like living life. And you're completely right. That's a very, like, that's something that I think we all notice at one point or another. But it was just the first time I really woke up to that of like, so what am I? Am I, my initial conclusion there, because I was 14, was like, oh, so whatever is good for me must be like the right thing in my story, in my perspective. And to an extent, I think we all kind of have to treat this as true, right? I mean, like, if you keep bending over for other people, you're not going to live much of a life at all. You know, if you keep letting everyone else define what is good and bad for you, you're going to end up not even being able to do good after a while, because, you know, how many times can you make everything best for someone else? So to an extent, like, that has to be true. But on another note, like, that's just a bad way of going. Because that was like the implicit conclusion to get there. I was kind of an edgy 14-year-old too, to an extent for sure. But that was like the takeaway there, right? Is like, okay, so this cop is a good guy for doing this in his eyes, so I need to do what makes me a good guy in my eyes. That makes sense. But like, that's also, as I think that's very much a 14-year-old's way of thinking about morality, you know? Because like, it isn't practical. And that's the other thing about morality that I think I should like think about too, as I try and develop my own morality here, is like, there's a difference between what's theoretically good and what's like, you know, in practice good, like functionally what's good, right? Like, I think we can all agree on a blanket statement of like, murder is a bad thing. Like, I hope there's no one watching this that's like, like, we should all agree that, right? I think that's like one of the first things that society as a whole like agrees about. But if you're murdering, you know, Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy, we'd go like, no, that would be the moral thing to do. And you can ask why, and I feel like most people look at that from like a fairly like a numbers perspective, like Hitler killed a million people, or, you know, way more. He killed millions of people, you're killing one guy, you're saving more lives, you know, like you would think that makes sense, and it does. That does make a lot of sense. So like, making a broad brush statement like that I could make saying, you know, murder is bad, something that a lot of people would agree on, it only really gets you so far, right? Because someday you're gonna have to, well, not have to, hopefully no one ever has to, you know, do something like that. You know, hopefully that responsibility doesn't lie on anyone in this audience, but someday we all will have to be in a situation where what we want to do will conflict with what we have to do, you know? I think that's a very natural thing that happens in life. Just like it makes sense logically of like, I should do whatever is good for me because I'm the only one living my life. That makes sense if you don't think about it too much. But when you're actually in practice in your life, you figure out like, oh, you'd be a pretty bad, like, morally that makes sense, but like you'd be a pretty bad person still if you did that. Just like you have to discover that, you also have to at a point discover like, some of the things that I will perceive to be good will end up being bad, and some of the things I perceive to be bad will end up being very necessary, you know? I feel like, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt here, but I feel like the easel today is a lot less stable than usual. Is that just me? I hope it's not shaking too much on camera. I apologize if it is. So yeah, that's the problem with this though, right? Is like, you can only make so many broad brush statements. I know very little about like moral theory, so I really can't like give a deep answer to this, I feel like. But I do know that like Kant or Kant or Kanti or whatever his name is, he says that, we'll call him Emmanuel because I know how to pronounce that. Emmanuel says that like, everyone has their own intrinsic value by being a human, and it is immoral to disrespect that value, which I think like hearing that makes perfect sense. Anything that you do that is directly in opposition to another person's life is immoral. Like if it disrespects their inherent value as a human. I think that is so true, and it makes a lot of sense. But when you bring that into some circumstances, that doesn't work. Because like that's just like, it's very utopian to believe that like every single circumstance in your life can end with both parties being 100% respected. Sometimes you gotta choose yourself. And then other times you gotta choose the other person. You know what I mean? Even when you don't want to. So like could we make a statement like everyone's life has intrinsic value, but you gotta like use some sort of critical judgment when determining whose life you will be working for. You know, I think that would make some sense. I also will say maybe Kant says something like that, or Emmanuel, I gotta respect him. Emmanuel maybe says something like that. I haven't read his stuff. I've just like seen like summaries of it basically. So that could be, maybe he says that, maybe Emmanuel's like, my guy Dice is gonna figure this out for me in the future, you know what I mean? Since it kind of sounds like we're buddies here based on how I'm calling him Emmanuel, you know, maybe that happened. I don't know for sure. Okay, so we're gonna take a risk here actually. I wanna see if this paint is, no, that paint is dry. I was gonna try and use it for some of this if it wasn't. This is the old palette from the mountain episode that I'm using for this color palette. Originally I was only gonna paint one eye. You'll notice I'm painting an eye 2 days in a row. Originally I was only gonna paint one because that's all I was interested in. Then two things happened. A, I mixed this paint really bad, and I have too much blue and too much tan, and now I have so much paint and I don't want to waste it. So there's probably going to be a couple days of eyes here. Maybe try and do them in some different styles. You know, that could be a little bit fun. And another thing happened. Oh, it came out really bad yesterday, as I said in the Instagram post. Always follow the Instagram. You guys know the drill. Follow the Instagram, guys. But back to this whole morality thing. That's why I think there's like kind of an inherent problem with making these broad brush statements about morality, because sometimes they just can't work. It is impossible to make a statement that's like 100% of the time true, you know? I just don't listen. I think there, oh my God, I said I think like a million times there. I think the statement, I think therefore I am, like, isn't that the one universal truth that we've come up with? I think that's fair. I think we could make an effort to come up with something that works, like, you know, maybe 85% of the time. But when you try and like embark to make something, figure out like a moral theory that is always going to work, I just don't think that makes much sense, you know? Times change, people change, right and wrong changes by the situation and by the decade, you know what I mean? So like I feel like we got to have some sort of like leeway towards morality. The other place that we got to address where morality comes from a lot is religion, for sure. I've seen people make the point a lot about like, even if you're an atheist, you still are a theist because you go off some moral code. And I don't think that's right, because usually the moral code's like coming from society, which comes from religion. Like it's a whole process there. But it's true that like our morals from society come from religion. Like for an example, people thinking that cheating and monogamy are like, or cheating is bad and monogamy is good. That's like a very Christian ideal, and that's a very Western thing to think. I personally do think cheating is bad. I don't want to make it sound like I think it's good at all. But you know, if you go to somewhere, a religion like Islam, they have a lot of the times multiple wives in certain cultures, and they see that as completely a good thing, you know? So that's why I will refrain from being like, oh, religion can give us our answer, because to an extent, yes, it can, right? Because it can give us an idea of what a functional morality will look like in a society, but I also think it cannot at all, because it will never be able to give us an idea of what like an objective moral code looks like, of like what's something we can all agree on, of what good and bad are. You know, like there's certain statements that you can make that I think are true. Like again, going by our like, you can only come up with something for like 85% of the time. I would say murder. Like murder's bad. That's something that I think we can all be like, for sure, right? again, 85% of the time, unless you're dealing with someone who is like a far worse person, right? And that's the thing where it's like, we're taught, I think like, I'm trying to remember when I was a kid, like what we got taught in order, right? Because I think like once we get exposed to the concept of murder, which I don't even remember being exposed to it, but like I know I was like sometime I figured it out. Like once we get past that, it kind of like it gets a little muddy, right? I feel like I learned that stealing was bad before murder, which is so interesting to me. Because like there's that whole question that's like the famous thing, which I think is the dumbest question in the world. Would you steal bread to feed your family? The answer should be yes, by the way, and if you answer anything else, like you're a little bit weird. I mean, try and do it from like a Walmart, not like a mom and pop shop, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, no, you, like, if your family's gonna, like, that's, like, duh. Why don't the people have bread? Let's ask that question, you know what I mean? But like, saying stealing is wrong is an interesting one, because I would say stealing from another individual is wrong, but our problem is like I feel like you can only make that statement in like an equitable society, you know what I mean? I've been stolen from before, personally, and I never did anything about it. Small things, you know, like my wallet when there was like $150 in it, like something like that. And like, even if I knew how it happened, I knew who did it, I've never done anything about it personally, because I've always been like, that person definitely needed more money to me. They took to the streets and just stole my stuff. They needed it more. So like, in my opinion, me, you know, maybe, let's say if I file a police report, I get them like arrested. I think that's a worse action because I just ruined their life, rather than just like, you know, obviously in this situation, the right thing would be for the person to ask. But like, I think it's a worse action to call somebody and do something about the theft than for them to actually steal from me, because they needed that more. I completely understand the injustice here is not so much that this person is stealing, but that this person is at the point where they need to steal. You know what I mean? And it's very unfortunate that I was, you know, the victim in that scenario. But I can't sit here and act like it's like I don't get it. You know what I mean? Big thing that I wanted to say too, because I feel like some people might hear that story and be like, "Yeah, you're an idiot." One, maybe I should have gotten my wallet back that day. But two, let's just debunk this right now. Nobody's taking to the streets and stealing because they want to. No one is like, "Oh, I'm a little bored today and I'm too lazy to get a job. Let's just go steal and rob on the streets." That's not how that works. That's not at all how that works. There is no, no. I don't know where this came from. I genuinely don't, but I've had full conversations with friends where they're like, no, if they're stealing, they're just like an objectively awful person who is like greedy and, you know, is I don't know, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here a little bit, but like, they're just lazy, greedy, and evil. That's why they're stealing. Like, no, not at all. That's just not true. Something else that's interesting though is because, okay, so I would say the action of stealing is bad in a void. Like, if you don't know the context of why this is happening, just the action of someone taking something that is yours, I think is wrong, right? Especially, I think this is most egregious in cases of like property. I'm a big believer that everyone should be able to have their own property. Everyone should be entitled to some sort of property. And I think when somebody like the bank reclaims property, I think that is theft in a very immoral form. So I would agree that theft in isolation is mostly a bad thing, right? This is interesting to me though, because like, there's always that thing that people say that like boggles my mind. I don't know, maybe somebody else understands this better than me. The famous saying of like, or maybe it's not that famous, but the saying, you are not your actions. Like, your actions are separate from you. You are not the voice in your head. You know, there's a whole host of these things where it's like, basically the end of it is like, you are a separate entity as a consciousness from what you do and like what you think. And I just, for the life of me, do not get that, because I think it's mainly a way to be like, the bad parts of you can be weeded out. They're not you. And to an extent, I think that's true. Like, I think you should make an effort if you have some real deep thing that's like tormenting you or something like that. Totally make the effort to like work on that. But I would disagree with the idea of like, that's not you. You know, that's you just as much. And the good parts of you aren't good without the bad parts of you. I'm a big believer in that, right? You know, the good days wouldn't be good without the bad days too. I don't know. I feel like there's nowhere else to go with that, really. Like, I think you are the bad things you do, for sure. And maybe there's like a more brainy explanation to why you are separate from your own thoughts that I just don't know about. But I think you're the bad thoughts. I think you're the good thoughts. Because at the end of the day, morality is invented. Like, we've invented this concept of morality, right? So you are not a good or bad person. Like, I think you can make that statement that objectively no one is good or bad. It's all circumstance, right? If you want to ask, are humans inherently good or inherently bad, that's a whole different conversation. But I mean, like, one person as a being is not good or bad. They're just kind of divided, if that makes sense. I'm a big believer in that. Which I'm a big believer in everything, I feel like. I just keep dropping that line that I'm a big believer in things. But I am, you know, let's own it. We're big believers these days. You know, I think you are all the parts of yourself. I think you should own that. But the conversation more centers around why you are those parts of yourself. Like, I think it's all circumstance. I think there's also a version of morality that maybe we could come up with here today of what, like, maybe it's all based off like the most primal things, right? So what do we need to survive? Like, what? Food, water, shelter? Is that like the big three of surviving, like you're in life and stuff? So maybe we could come up with a definition here that like the good things are things that help people get food, water, and shelter. Bad things are things that you know, take away food, water, and shelter. So, for an example, that's why we could say murder is bad, because it completely removes life and autonomy. I think maybe we could say that. Like, anything that takes away life, whether it's by debilitating someone from the things they need to live or directly, is bad. Maybe we could say that. I feel like that makes some sense. You know, again, like going by our 85% of the time rule, I think I could think of exceptions maybe, but I think that's like a fair thing to say here. Because, well, that's why we consider Robin Hood good, right? Because in the original Robin Hood story, all the rich people in that town or whatever are keeping all the money from the poor people, and they're gonna die because they're starved and things like that. And Robin Hood steals from the rich and gives to the poor, which makes him good because he's taking from someone else to let other people have the autonomy to live. That's another big one, is autonomy, right? Like, I feel like that's why we consider like a lot of freedom restricting acts to be wrong. I don't want to say the words exactly, but I think we all know what I'm getting at here. Is that not why we consider all those to be wrong in a way? Because like it very much restricts someone's personal autonomy. Because yeah, I think that makes some sense. But when do you gain autonomy? Because I think we can all agree that like I shouldn't have been running around at like 10 years old with free personal autonomy. No, at a certain age, you still need your parents. And I think 18 is dumb. Like, it's an arbitrary number. Also, like, have you spoken to an 18-year-old? Like, that's not a real person either. I wouldn't even say me. I don't even feel like I'm a real person right now. You know what I mean? This is where it's so tough to come up with things like this. I've met 45-year-olds where I'm like, you have the mentality of someone who's 15 right now. And then I've met 15-year-olds where I'm like, oh my God, like, you're very, like, I would trust you behind the wheel more than this other guy who I've met that's older and like is a million times just like doesn't have, I don't want to be too mean here, but like is just lower on like, they're weird, you know. We've all met someone like this, right? I don't know why I'm dancing around this as if we can't all relate to this in one way or another. Like, we've all met a guy where we're like, something happened and you never got past 15. Usually they got a thick gold chain on too for some reason. I feel like I've met a lot of old guys who are like in their 50s who like are still wearing that, rocking that chain from high school, but not like a cool way, not like in a cool way, and like I got this chain when I was like the man, and like when I was the man at like 15, and I'm still wearing it. This is getting so mean. I did not want to bring that negativity in there, but I have I don't like that. It makes me very annoyed. Like those people, but like at the same time, like everyone deserves autonomy though. You know what I mean? So how do we decide if we're saying it's immoral to take away, restrict someone's autonomy in any sense? A statement I would agree with personally. Would we, like, where do we draw the lines for that then? Also, would we say then like all forms of government are immoral because they take away our autonomy in one way or another? Like even by, like any form of governance is technically taking away autonomy, right? Because they make laws, like even, oh, that's weird though, wait, because technically saying you can't murder is taking away your autonomy to murder, but we know that it's a good thing to say you can't murder. I guess, right? So that's like another thing where it's like those two kind of contradict each other. But also I think murder would be wrong because it's taking away someone's autonomy to live. So if murder is wrong because it's taking away someone's autonomy to live, but saying you can't murder is wrong because it's taking away autonomy to murder, then what do we do with this whole autonomy? Do we just forget the autonomy part of this? I feel like that's where we're headed. I feel like the autonomy angle is not really working here because it just presents a whole host of problems. Because you could do that kind of with anything, right? If I say like, to take away someone's food, water, shelter is wrong, something that I feel like is kind of good at this point, like that makes sense to me, then I'm also like saying you can't do that, though, is also wrong because it's taking away someone's autonomy to take away food, water, or shelter. So this whole autonomy angle is kind of weird then, isn't it? Because I think you got to take away some autonomy, namely the autonomy to do those things of murder, food, water, shelter, those things I'm talking about here, right? So that's interesting. I don't want to get too graphic here again because I know these can be very touchy subjects, but I will just throw out, I think we can all agree, any crime of a sexual nature is wrong with no exception. I would say that one has no exception, like at all, or at least I can't think of one. So that's solid. So it's weird because you can come up with certain rules of like, we can all agree on this, but then other things, like there are huge companies out there right now that are fully just doing the worst things, taking away people's autonomy for food, water, and shelter. Or like health is a big one. Like everyone has had a struggle of like, I can't afford this care, and like things like that, right? In a way, someone, I don't know the ins and outs of this whole conversation well enough to exactly pinpoint who, somewhere in there someone is restricting a capability for you to live. Whether you want to blame it on the doctor for not doing the procedure, which doesn't make any sense to me, or the company for denying the care, or the hospital for having their policies, or the system or the government, whoever you want to blame it on, someone there is clearly doing something wrong because they're taking away your capacity to live. So can we say food, water, shelter, life are the big ones then? Does that make sense? Is anything that would, okay. I think we're close to actually coming up with something here. Can we say anything that's good is things that enhance someone's capability to have food, water, shelter, the big three, or life, food, water, shelter, life. And then the things that are bad are anything that like habilitates or makes it harder for someone to have those things of food, water, shelter, life. Is that the statement that we can make here? Because to me that sounds solid, but I feel like saying it out loud now, it's hard to critique because I just said it, like I just came up with that. But I think it's also like one of those things that sounds good but isn't. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like to me right now saying it. I feel like it sounds better than it actually is. But I can't really pinpoint why. That's just like a vibe I'm getting off of this statement I just made. I also, which I feel like we kind of established at the beginning, I'm going off the assumption here that everyone's life has individual value by virtue of being human. I've heard people be like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. I don't think it's a common take, but it is unfortunately something that people do think for one reason or another, that like some lives are worth more than others. No, I will not. You cannot convince me to go on that like train of thought at all. I will never be capitulating to that, just because, like, no, like, I'm not, who's to decide that, right? How would I ever be like, that makes sense? No, I think I would say that if someone's taking other lives, it makes sense to, you know, as we said, with our extreme examples of like Hitler and stuff, that makes sense to me. But to be like someone's life is worth less because of what they've accomplished is very stupid. You know what I mean? I don't think that makes any sense. And I also think it's a very slippery slope to go down, you know, because what society values at one point is very different than what society values at another point. And I think all that's going to get you going with that premise of like lives can change in value based on what happens in them, I think all that's going to get you is like a very cynical viewpoint of the world. So I'm going off the premise here that everyone's life has the exact same value just because they're human. Something I hope we all agree with and I hope we all believe, right? Even if you want to call it utopian, which I guess in some ways it is, but that's how it should be, you know? I think that makes sense. So if we're going off that assumption, then I think it makes some sense to say that like this, like we've come to a good conclusion here, that things that enable the capabilities for life, whether it's food, water, shelter, otherwise, are good. Things that debilitate them are bad. Problem that I just came up with. Something like, what if something is good, like off this premise, right? I could say if all lives are worth more, and I'm gaining ability to give myself more food, water, shelter, and life, whether that's health in one way or another. Like, say I'm gaining wealth off people, not by explicitly hurting them or doing something bad to them. Like maybe I'm just selling a product to them, something like that. Inherently, that makes the accumulation of money a good thing then, right? Because it's enriching. Is it moral to enrich your own life? I guess it kind of has to be, right? Like you have to, in one way or another, like that kind of has to happen for all of us to be human. So I guess, but like, can you, let's say I do a product. Let's say I make fidget spinners, something that's harmless, costs everyone who gets one $2. It's not hurting the consumer's life, but like, who's making those fidget spinners, you know? Maybe it's taking away from the capabilities of the factory worker who's making them. I don't know where they make fidget spinners, but I'm gonna assume they don't pay well in those factories, just like we've all held a fidget spinner. I don't know why my mind went to fidget spinners, you know that? Because I haven't held a fidget spinner in 10 years. Minimum of 10 years. Like, it's been a long time since fidget spinners were a thing. Wow, oh my god, wait, that was like, what, 2016? It's 2025 right now. Fidget spinners are long gone. Wow. You know, fidget spinners are like done. That's crazy, that fidget spinners have fallen that far in the short time they've been gone. Okay, so we're just focusing on this painting real quick. We're doing the eye now, which I've been very scared to do because, knock on wood, the rest of this is coming out pretty solid so far, and I feel like this eye is really about to ruin some things, like hardcore. I need to make sure this brush is very dry so it doesn't smudge everything around it. That's what happened yesterday. So yesterday I wanted to do that style of painting with a very dry brush, and I just lobbed on the paint for some reason. I don't know what was with me. Maybe I just stopped paying attention. That definitely has happened. I think it's just a something that happens by like byproduct of like, I'm not good enough at this yet to envision something and make it happen on the canvas. Even this with what's in front of me right now is not what I wanted to paint today, which I'll probably end up making that for tomorrow's eye, so no spoilers, because we're in Armageddon now, so buckle up, because that's what's going on here. It doesn't look that bad, but it's just definitely doesn't look too good either. Okay, that's not the worst. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. So So, okay, I'm gonna try and clean it up a little bit. I think I can rescue this, to be honest. I don't think the eye is gonna destroy the painting here, at least. But yeah, I feel like that's a fairly... So here's the problem with this, right? I think this is the first time in any paint and talk where I've come with a problem and genuinely come up with, like, something to say about it. Like, I've come to sort of... I mean, I'm basing it off of other conclusions, but, like, I've sort of come to a conclusion here, right? That's cool, but it also makes it so now that I have something to say, I have, like, I can't critique my own ideas very well. This is actually just a big flaw with my character that you'll all be discovering over the course of this year as we paint and talk together. I'm very incapable of when I come up with an idea. Some people, the best people in my opinion, are really good at coming up with an idea and giving a million reasons why it won't work. I think those people are great because when they do an idea, it's way more surefire, right? Me, personally, my issue is that when I come up with an idea, I'm kind of just an optimist about everything all the time, so I come up with a million reasons why it will work. And I'm sure you kind of saw, I can't think now of the conversation because I'm in the middle of it still, but I'm sure you kind of just saw it with this episode. Maybe you've seen it before too in other videos of mine or Paint and Talk episodes if you've been here for a while. And that's definitely a problem, right? So now that I've come to this conclusion, which like feels good, like it feels like it's like a fairly decent enough conclusion, I have no capability to pick apart my own words now. You know what I mean? This is a big issue. I only can really come up with like small loopholes within it, but they usually lead back to just the same sort of place. You know what I mean? So I don't really know, like this is basically a call to action to say, please critique that idea that I just laid out for you all of like those things, you know, what's good and bad. Like, please come up with reasons why it's completely wrong, because I feel like that's how we can have an active discussion here. You know, I know in a lot of universities, there are like discussion groups where people will throw around like philosophical or like just like talking points and like deconstruct each other, and they all become much better thinkers because of it. I'm gonna assume a lot of us watching this, and I know I'm not, are not like privy to having something like that for one reason or another. So maybe we could make this that too, like along with painting. You know, I'd love to hear you guys let me know what you think of like what you know, like when I come up with something, which is like very rare. Usually I just end it going, what a terrible discussion that was, and just go on with my little day. But you know, when it does happen, I think it'd be good if you guys like fully ripped it apart in the comments. And then we could do a part 2 where I'm like thinking again about it, because I want to be able to like actually find some stuff out about morality, and I came up with like half a conclusion. But yeah, this painting is more or less wrapped up. Yeah, I'd say this is pretty good. This is probably one of the better paintings I've had. I don't know, maybe I just think it looks better because I didn't like completely botch it in comparison. But anyways, that's all for today's episode of Paint and Talk. You guys know the drill. I want you all to head over to the Instagram and check out this painting and all its colors and without filters and all that stuff. And until tomorrow, comment down below your thoughts on what I said here today. And hopefully we can have another discussion about this very, very soon.